Yeah, it was really hot, wasn't it? I kind of forgot about that. Oh, the poor teacher. Oh. Being a sub is tough enough anyways, and then having to do that, then it's tough job. All right, so good news for all of you. You want to hear the good news? Tomorrow, after you get back from the fairgrounds, you get to do what? You can try that. Your essay will be easy to grade then. What can you bring tomorrow? Outline. And how much will it be in the outline? No more than 6 words total. Okay, I mean, no, the bare bones, has to be bare bones. Do not write your essay in the outline. And I'm looking at you. Any questions? A few of you turned in, I said I would look at it if you turned it in on Teams. If you have looked at it. If you are going to be gone tomorrow, if you're going to be gone tomorrow, would you have to do it on Monday? When you get back? And I have some homework for you to do over the break. Because that is life. I told you you're going to get homework. Don't give me that look. You're supposed to be happy. Let's try it again. You're going to get homework over the break. Yay! Keep giving that look. Keep doing it. You get even more. So, you have got to do a bit of work because that's the way life is. In fact, I'm going to give this to all of you now, so I don't have to worry about it tomorrow. Whoa. Whoa. Paper eggs. I know.
Fancy?
Blew your mind. I know, I keep giving you little pieces of paper because that's what I do.
Is it not a
This music is a big
What's that?
Is it good in there?
All right. Yeah.
Do we need one more extra? Or do you?
Oh, let's go.
You know, I'm just kind of.
Oh, it's good.
So we are not going to do a quiz on chapter 7 because we're a little bit behind, but there is a short chapter in this book called, wait for it, chapter 12.
What?
So you are going to read chapter 12. We'll quiz on Monday when you get past it. And the reason why we do this, I know, wait a minute, you're skipping all these chapters. Oh yeah, we're going to go 12, chapter 30, and we're done. I am tired this week, and the AP exam is going to be a blast for you guys, and I want more favorites. So now we're doing nothing but climb trees and chase the howler monkeys. I can see those howler monkeys move back there. What?
They said we're going to climb trees, and I said, and then you said something about monkeys, and I said, search for land.
Well, we'll go up there, run the monkeys out of the trees. That will bring the land wall right here. Well, they're not in the trees now because of the howler monkeys.
Yeah, and they're not the tree wall, right?
And
No,
there's no such thing as tree wall.
Oh, but there's such thing as land wall, right?
All right. So we got to reach chapter 12 real quick. And the reason why is we're coming up to the most. It's a cataclysm coming called the Industrial Revolution. And this is going to blow everything up. And all these so-called reforms are going to come out of it. And in the textbook, they do it all the things that the reactions to the Industrial Revolution in a chapter. And I like doing it as I go through the Industrial Revolution, I like democracy and everything else. So you're going to read the chapter, get those basic things down, so you know them. And so then when I talk about them when it relates to the Industrial Revolution, you know what it is. So that's what we do, chapter 12 on your own. Sound good? Got to do it. And I know I wouldn't, if I didn't have to give you homework, I wouldn't do it. Okay, I know it's just to spite you. Now I'm doing it because I have to. I would do it if I didn't have the exam coming up, just to make your life miserable. I would just give you copy the dictionary and the Z. Our teacher did that. We had a copy, if we talked in class, we had a copy of the dictionary. Huh? Yeah, only Miles City can do this. And that was also 40 years ago, 50 years ago. No, 50 years ago, 60. It's a long time ago. It actually really is. Yes.
So we're seeing this, right?
We'll come back to it. We will come back to it. All right. So remember, we're writing an essay tomorrow. And so any questions on anything you can think of? Yes. What's the meaning of life? Kit Kats.
I thought you said like cats. At first I thought I heard cats.
Huh?
I heard like Kit Kats. Like a cat.
Kitty cats.
Like meow.
Why are Kit Kats the perfect food? Let's go through this one more time.
Chocolate.
Yeah, you have your two main food groups, the chocolate food group and the wafer food group. That's science. And you go to the FDA and stuff, and they'll tell you the same thing. Right? You with me on that?
No.
And
Peanut butter.
peanut butter is a poor substitute for wafers. So with that, that's once again, that's proven by science. There's math and stuff. So with that, remember you have to have the topic for your thesis statement. That's, what do I refer to the topic as what? Your position, or the thing that ties all your blueprint together, what is that? Why? No way. And then what's the Z? There's no Z. You put a Z in, you're in trouble. Any Z's on your test. What's the blueprint? And those will be the topics for your body paragraphs. And all your body paragraphs, you must relate it back to what? Specifically, what part of your thesis? The why. The why part. So you need that common denominator. If you send your thesis to me online, I'll take, at least I'll try to take a look at it on Teams. If you just type it in or take a picture or something like that. Sound good? You can have your outline. We start writing as soon as the bell rings. When you are done, you're done. Okay, with that. You got what? So with that. Okay. I think really, I don't know if I like that. Okay, let's get it. Let's get it so with that. Okay, so where do we finish in here? Do we get to, oh, did we have Kentucky, Virginia resolutions till we got through this? What were the laws that restricted freedom of speech? Yeah, Alien and Sedition Act. What was the war? We were fighting what undeclared war against whom? Yeah, we were all fighting the French, right? We weren't all fighting the French. The Quezon War against the French. And this Alien and Sedition Act would quiet down who? It was meant to keep whom quiet? Yeah, the Republicans. And so we got the first two parties. And so we got through here, we got this, we got all this. Do we get the Convention and Peace? Yeah, Convention 1800. It basically a kind of ended the war. But it wasn't really a war. There was some couple naval battles. Remember, there was no navy, just a few ships. So no real navy. There was a tiny little army that fought along the frontier. That's it. So there'd be peace. By the way, these are U.S. Sailors taken by French pirates. And so let's get to the age of Jefferson. We jump right to Andrew Jackson. The age of Jefferson. And there's the Jefferson Memorial. If you ever get a chance to go to Washington, D.C., the Jefferson Memorial is really cool. My room, the heat broke, and it was just blasting heat. That's why that's down. So now I have no heat, which is better anyways. I can't control the heat. See, it always seems to be either too hot or too cold. And since I have to be here all the time, I prefer cold. Don't you prefer cold with me? Overall, wouldn't you rather be a little bit cooler? You can always put on a jacket. All right. So, the election of 1800. And this then would be a major contested election and a rematch of the previous election. Here we have John Adams, the sitting president, the incumbent on the right. And remember how they draw a painting, somewhat like a matronly elderly woman. Jefferson's a little bit more awkward. He's in that kind of a little bit younger, but this creepy flag of him should tell everything you need about Jefferson. He was the vice president, and they're running again. But remember, they still have that problem with the electoral college. Whoever wins first is president. Second is vice president. the Constitution will be amended in 1801 to make it one vote for president, one vote for vice president. But that's not quite yet. So we have the creepy pictures, another bitter, nasty election. The Alien and Sedition Acts were the big issue. But remember, there's no popular vote. State assemblies chose the electors. State assemblies elect voters, at least they still do as of today, choose the electors, but they don't have to. And speaking of that, I decided it was time to show you about paintings. One of the reasons why they would always try to soften the images. So these are two Habsburg monarchs of Spain. Now I want you to ponder one thing. Yes, they look, well, they have prominent chins. This is a cautionary note. Do not marry your cousin. But the other thing is, with the paintings, they were trying to make them look better. I want you to just think about that for a second. Poor Philip III couldn't hardly open his mouth. Huh?
I thought that was a girl.
That was the way they softened the features to make it look. Remember what I told you? The junior high age girls or elderly women. That's what everybody, male or female, looked like. Poor Charles V too. So let's get to the presidential race. So every elector had 2 votes. And they came up with 2 running columns. So it's kind of confusing the way they did the math. But Jefferson was 73, Adams was 65. Jefferson is president. Or is he? Do you see the problem? Who else has 73? That means nobody has a majority. There's a tie. One of the electors for the Republicans was supposed to vote for somebody else. They weren't sure which one, so they all voted for Burr and Jefferson. Therefore, we have a tie. That means it goes to the House of Representatives. Now, Burr probably should have said, I know the intent of the voters was not to have me as president. Jefferson will be president. But Burr is like, I kind of want to be president. That'd be kind of fun. And the only reason Jefferson chose him is because Burr could swing the 12 electors from New York. He had been governor. And so that's why they chose Burr. You know, Burr was a war hero, very intelligent man, but also incredibly ambitious. So Burr decided, I want to be president too, and now we go to the House. And this would be the first election that would go to the House. There's only been a couple. And people were appalled. The Republicans were furious, and Federalists were overjoyed. Like, hee. We get to destroy the leader of the Republican Party, Jefferson, and send it to disarray. And they're already mad about something else. So tie went to the House. Each state gets 1 vote. Regardless of how many members of the House or members of the House they have, each state gets 1 vote. Well, here's how the vote total came out. Because many Federalists at first were like, let's vote for Burr to mess up the Republicans. But a few decided if we vote for Burr, that will set a terrible precedent down the road. Because the clear intent of the voter, of the Electoral College, was Jefferson as president. And as a political stunt, this would be quite damaging. I wonder what would happen today if something like this happened. And then Alexander Hamilton, the Federalist, who by then was, everybody hated him. But Hamilton decided to throw his support to Jefferson. He hated Jefferson, but despised Burr. They were political rivals in New York. They had major disagreements. Hamilton was trying to reestablish his political career in New York. So he threw his support to Burr. So when the vote came out, Jefferson did get 10 states. 2 states abstained. But Jefferson's president. Burr never forgave Jefferson. And now a few more events down the road. A few years later, Burr, who hated being vice president, tried to run for governor of New York again. And Hamilton threw his support to Clinton running against Burr, and Burr lost again. And then they started a letter writing campaign. And stuff's going to happen. Specifically what? Burr's going to murder Hamilton. That's coming. The vice president will murder the former Secretary of State and one of the leaders of the first political parties. Good times in politics. Moving on. Not only that, slave power. What compromise beyond the Constitution did Northerners call slave power? The 3/5. I know, he said 2/3. It's some fraction. The 3/5 compromise. This is where it got the term slave power. And they literally referred to Jefferson as the Negro president. Why? Remember, they counted slaves as a ratio of 3/5, or 60% of the population of slaves into the population of the state. And that gave more votes per white voter in the South. And Northerners are saying slaves should not count as the population at all, because this gives the South an unfair advantage in the Electoral College, and slaves are slaves. Remember, slaves are not voting. They're not calling Jefferson the Negro president in the North because people of African descent are supporting Jefferson. It's the slave owners are supporting Jefferson. And so here's a cartoon against Jefferson, and it says the philosophic cock is being like, he is like the rooster, and then the slaves are like his hens. And whenever they would draw Africans, they would draw with a turban on at that time. Don't bog yourself in details. That's just the way they were drawn because of the Mediterranean world. And the thought was they were all Muslims, which some was sub-Saharan, most weren't. And Jefferson, like the philosopher, did the Declaration of Independence, and what is he really? A slave herder. That's where they drew him. If they only counted, if they did not count slaves towards population, towards the House of Representatives and therefore the Electoral College, so everybody with me, they did not count slaves. So they only counted citizens. The vote in the Electoral College would have been Adams 65, Jefferson 63. And Adams would have been elected president, re-elected. Who knows how history would have changed, but it's one of the great what-ifs in history, because Adams, for very political reasons, would not have, for example, probably bought the Louisiana Purchase. Yes.
So had they not counted the slaves, then Adams would have won?
Yeah.
Okay, they did count that as 3/5.
That's 3/5, yeah.
So then.
So there's more electoral votes in the South, because that's where the slaves are, yes. So Northerners are going to hate slave power then for the rest, well, all the way up till 1865. Why 1865? What would end in 1865? Slavery and the Civil War. Nobody called it the war between the states. So, one more little thing. This was a whispering campaign in the North saying, look what slavery does. And the issue was Sally Hemmings. And this would become huge in 1804. Sally Hemmings was Jefferson's wife's, well, they would say maidservant, but she was a slave. Jefferson's wife died, so Sally Hemmings would accompany Jefferson like to Paris and things like that. And the next thing you know, Sally Hemmings started having redheaded children. Do you remember the fornication laws? You remember those? And that's what this thing is talking about. They call it Virginian luxuries. So here's the slave herder beating a slave, and then the slaveholder doing this. That's a northern from 1804. This was whispered in 1800, but would become a big thing in the North. Look what slavery does. Look how morally repugnant slavery is. We've already talked about what the fornication laws were made to do, to hide this. Remember about the fornication laws, what was happening to female slaves, and that's what's happening here. That's what happened to Sally Hemmings. To give you an idea how creepy this was, Jefferson's wife, anybody want to guess Jefferson's wife's half-sister? Was Sally Hemmings. Anybody want to guess who Sally Hemmings' father was? Jefferson's father. Slaves. That's what we did with slaves. Yeah, slavery is this morally repugnant thing. This would become a massive issue. And by definition, this is rape. Be clear about it. And Jefferson would kind of deny this, but now through DNA evidence, now we know for a fact this is true. Sally was, I can't remember the exact age. She had to be born in the late 1850s. So she must have been, late 8, or mid-8, no, that's 18. Late 1750s, so she would have been 40 or so when it comes pregnant. So, this is what we call, the big thing is, I put on the age of Jefferson, but the revolution of 1800. That's what Republicans call it. And Republicans are saying, this is a new world when they got a commoner as president. He rode his horse around Washington, D.C. The so-called District of Columbia then. By the way, there's nothing there. The brand new executive mansion, Adams lived in for a couple months, and now Jefferson did. They did not call it the White House yet. It's the executive mansion. And Jefferson would be the first one to shake hands and really look like a commoner. And a lot of people, I mean, the Republicans claim this will be a new form of government where the people will be in power, which is a big radical shift from when they wrote the Constitution saying we won't have democracy. Adams was so furious, he didn't go to the inauguration. He was so mad at Jefferson and thought he would destroy the country. He took off. And there'd be a few presidents that would do that. His son, John Quincy Adams, wouldn't go to the inauguration of Andrew Jackson either. He was so mad he left. And Andrew Johnson, the impeached former vice president of Lincoln, he wouldn't go to the inauguration of Ulysses S. Grant. I'll show you. And so, upset about not winning, lots of reasons. Then it became like a tradition, they all went. And then President Trump did not go to the inauguration of Biden. And so, I don't know if that will start a new trend or not, we'll see. But, Jefferson's philosophy. Let's get to Jefferson's philosophy. And there's a number of things that made up what Jefferson's philosophy. We'll get to the biggie at the end. The first thing is he really wanted to personify this idea of the common man. The common man. Now, when he said the common man, oh, by the way, what does common mean? No, he didn't mean that. Common man to him meant what kind of man? All white men, regardless of wealth. All white men. So yeah, I know we're skipping a lot of people, but that's still a big step. But what does common mean? Okay, don't think of common. We hear this, you might think like average. No, that's not what it means. What it means people who are not of aristocratic birth. They're not born rich. They're not born with a silver spoon in their mouth. No, these are regular people. Regardless of their wealth, the idea is everybody will have a position in this new democracy we're creating, and that's why they called it Jeffersonian democracy. And what it meant was, to Jefferson, white men are sovereign. But we look at this as the beginnings of the concept that the people are sovereign. It's a big step. It's still a long ways to go if you believe in some kind of democratic republic. If you don't believe in a democratic republic, you might think it's gone too far, which a lot of people believe. But the people are sovereign. It's a step in that direction, but still a tiny step. And it can go backwards, because more and more of the idea that all white men are sovereign, and regardless of wealth, all white men should have the right to vote and pick their leaders, then why should women vote even if they have property? So women who could vote in some states because they have property would actually lose their vote beginning in this era. Rights can happen, and rights can be taken away unless people are vigilant. But notice I put, didn't really believe this. Are all white men, should they have power? Well, his house is a good example. This is Monticello. How big is this house? By the way, classical style, copying the Roman dome, the Pantheon in Rome. So everyone wanted a dome. The first U.S. Capitol had a dome like this. The current dome would be finished during the Civil War. How many stories? How big is that house? How many floors would you say are in that house? Well, there was like, he must be asking this because it's not going to be what we think. I know, yeah. But doesn't it kind of look like maybe 3, maybe 4, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, up to here like that? It's an illusion. Jefferson taught the common man, but he still wants to be elite. He made his house. He designed it to seem from a distance smaller than what it actually was, so he could appear more like a commoner. He could act like one. He could shake people's hands. Yet he is elite and he wants to be in power. The biggest library in America, the biggest wine cellar in America, Thomas Jefferson. See these windows and the door? They're huge. They're massive. So I came across here on this door. So you open it up and it's split. There's a floor split right down the middle of the window. There's 2 floors right here. So the window is in between, like it's in the bottom of one floor and then the top of another floor. You walk in, it's huge to look small. So you can give the illusion of a commoner, a very wealthy commoner. No, it's exceedingly wealthy, yes.
2 questions. How many floors was it? And then they have any like square feet it was?
I don't know the square foot. I mean, we could look it up, but it's massive. It's a huge house. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It's huge, yeah. It's massive. It's not quite 70 feet, but it's big, and that dome is big. It's one of those you start walking to, coming out of the parking lot. You drive to, it's part of the National Park Service now, and it's like, that's a big house. That's a huge house. So there's a little bit of an illusion. 2, he believed in an agrarian or agricultural society. His goal was a society of yeomen. Yeomen? What's a yeoman? You know? A small, independent farmer. A farmer that owns their own land. A small, independent farmer. Yeoman. Was Jefferson a yeoman? No! Jefferson was a big plantation owner. He's not working his own land. He acts like it, but he's not. But his vision for the America is small farmers. That's why he's so obsessed with getting land here for small farms. So that would be the society. So here is the frontier farmer plowing his field, and this one is supposed to be the independent farmer surveying his domain. Nobody can tell them what to do. And the big element of this is private land ownership. Private land ownership. So settlers will go take the land, settle. They're very proud of that term, settling. We'll take the wild land from the people who live there and settle it, which means like civilize and farm it. And we will own it. And if you own your own land, you're not beholden to anybody else. Nobody can tell you what to do. You decide who to vote for. You decide what, how you will make a living, who you'll sell your products to, who you'll buy from. You make those decisions. Independent farmers. Because if you live in a city and work for a wage, like most people would, you're not free. You're always looking behind your back to see what your boss is telling you to do. And when you enter the workplace for most of the day, you're doing what somebody else says. You are not free. They are free. To Thomas Jefferson, if you work for something called a wage, now this is still pre-capitalism, so it's not quite what you're thinking of yet. You're not truly free. You are a wage what? Slave. So he's anti-wage. He was not anti-market. He was not anti-manufacturing, but he was fearful of wage slaves. Because he saw those merchant capitalists, those merchants, not capitalists, but those merchants that Hamilton wanted to support would tell people how to vote. And you're not a republic anymore. Soon you'll have a dictatorship. A better way to look at it would be an oligarchy. Remember that term, ruled by a few? So, next, he feared the large central government. He feared it. Now, this is what he said, and he feared it for a very good reason. As he said it, the large central government will favor certain people. So government should be hands-off. The term for hands-off, more and more becoming popular from an author by the name of Adam Smith. He took the French term for hands-off, laissez-faire. Now, it's been Americanized to laissez-faire. And you will see it pronounced both. I pronounce it both ways and not even realize I'm doing it. So laissez-faire is closer to the French, but laissez-faire, let's read here all the time. Hands off. So the government should not be making rules. The government should, there's certain things the government should be doing, but hands off on how people make a living, especially those small farmers. Why? Because big government will only help the wealthy. As he saw, Hamilton's policies will create monopolies. Or do you remember the Tea Act? What company did the British give a monopoly to that would lead to the Boston Tea Party? Do you remember the company? Yeah, the East India Company. And to Jefferson, that's all governments will do. They'll favor the wealthy, they'll make monopolies, and strangle small farmers. But once again, this is pre-capitalism. That's why I have a picture of rural Washington, D.C. Remember how they wanted a rural capital? What was that bill that the rural capital would be in D.C., be the compromise to get it passed? What was the bill to pay off the debt? What do we call that? Yeah, that's the assumption bill. Here's rural D.C., and here's a painting of the very sparse, but I guess it's just cavernous, executive mansion, the White House. Today. There was nothing there. There's this big building with a bunch of empty rooms. And I like this, just a nice countryside. If you go to Washington, D.C. today, it's a little different, slightly. So, next, he wanted a frugal government. His goal was to cut government spending. Have you heard the term frugal before? That means very careful with your money. He was very fearful of long-term debt. And that's why he wanted to cut taxes. He wanted to cut taxes. I'll explain the bottom pictures in just a second. He wanted to cut taxes. Not so much because he was opposed to taxes, but as he saw it, if you have passed a law today to collect taxes, that means tomorrow you have tax revenue, you have money. Meaning like today. Let's say today you got a new job, that means tomorrow you have a paycheck. Does that make sense? So if you're sitting there today knowing tomorrow I'm going to have a paycheck, or I'm going to have money, that might encourage you to do what today? Spend, especially spend money you don't have. So like you're thinking, let's say you get that first job, you're 20, you think, now I'm going to buy a new car because I have a job. So you take a loan out to buy a car because you think tomorrow you have a job. And so that's what he's thinking here. If we limit taxes, that'll lessen the chance of borrowing. Now, why was Jefferson so concerned about borrowing? Because he had crushing debt. Remember I mentioned the big wine collection and the library he had? Where do you think he got the money? He borrowed money using his land and his slaves as collateral, and all he could think about was ways to pay off his debt. And so he's thinking, wow, if I can't pay off my debt, because I can't find the gold, I don't want the country to be in the same situation as me. Which also should also remind you, oh, do we really want somebody with that bad a debt being responsible for the debt? But anyways, so why do I show the fort at West Point and one of these first ships? They cut back on the military. That was one of the first expenditures with the Department of Navy and for the Quasi-War. So they mothballed a few of the ships, which means they basically just stripped them of the crew so they didn't need them anymore. And the already tiny army, they limited the size. West Point remained a fort. They were training officers. There was not yet a military academy, but they cut back on the military. Next, he was obsessed with the West. All he could think about was the West. The back porch of Monticello faces west. He would take hikes and go like to hills overlooking, along the Potomac, overlooking this beautiful town called, it wasn't a town yet, called Harper's Ferry, and sit and ponder if we can go west over the mountains. I will explain Harper's Ferry down the road. And remember, he's a plantation owner. So he's thinking, I want this land. But also, he wants it for small farmers, as I mentioned before. What about this territory, though? This is still American Indian territory. They would have said Indian territory. And this picture is actually from a book about the 5 civilized tribes, who they called this area here Indian territory. And here, what about the humans that live here and farm this land? What about them? Anybody know why I put the word Louisiana next to that? Anybody know? What's Louisiana territory? What's Jefferson's plan to do with these people here? Force them here. So then the U.S. could take this out of plantations and small farms. 4 different times in Jefferson's life, he tried to have some kind of expedition go one of these 2 ways through here to get a better claim for the United States. The first time was while he was ambassador to France in the 1780s. Most famously, it would be the Port of Discovery. That would be the last attempt, which at first was a secret operation to try to get that claim. He's obsessed with it. Lastly, pragmatic. Pragmatic is a great word. A very generic definition is practical, or to do what's necessary. Because here's the thing. Jefferson was intensely pragmatic. So he might say a lot. He might write a lot. He's kind of all over the place. For example, he would say things like, we must have a strict interpretation of the Constitution. No going to war without a declaration of war. Slavery is morally evil and it's going to destroy the country. Remember, he has said all of these things. Yet when he became president, those statements got in a way with what's practical for government or what's necessary to do his main goals. And so what this basically means is he's not going to be tied to what he said before. If it's got to be done, he's going to do it, even if he said something differently in public. So, for example, he said, when Adams was president, we need a strict interpretation of the Constitution. Yet when the time came to buy Louisiana, right here, what did he do? He jumped at it. Even though the Constitution nowhere doesn't say the U.S. government can buy land. Doesn't say that. It's implied. He said strict interpretation until he's president. That's pragmatic. Another example. Can't go to war with France without a declaration of war. Yet when pirates were stopping American-owned ships in the Mediterranean, he sent our tiny fleet to the Mediterranean, what was called the Barbary Wars, without a declaration of war, because he said it was necessary. He knew slavery was a moral evil that would destroy the country. Yet not only were his policies pro-slavery, pro-expansion of slavery, he kept his slaves, including his children, in slavery, and sold them like all slave owners did, his own children, because he was just as much of a slaveholder as anybody else. And when he died, of course they remained slaves. Yet he knew it was morally wrong. So pragmatism is a little complex, isn't it? That's pragmatism. Now, you heard Jefferson say one thing and do another. What would you call him? Doesn't seem hypocritical? And it really bothered Jefferson, but he's also, we don't. Many politicians, in fact, most presidents have been pragmatic. Now, pragmatic does not make you correct. It doesn't make you doing the right thing or moral. It's just, I got to do it. I don't care what I said before. Like Abraham Lincoln, intensely pragmatic. In the war, even though the South seceded to protect slavery, I'll hold things together for the Union, then I need to maybe open it up to make it about freedom, and he would do it. Intensely pragmatic. Franklin Roosevelt was intensely pragmatic. Both Roosevelts were intensely pragmatic. Gosh, Eisenhower, Kennedy, Johnson, all pragmatic. Nixon, pragmatic. Reagan, not so much. a little bit. Reagan's more pragmatic than people realize. In your lifetime, President Bush was fairly pragmatic. President Obama was intensely pragmatic. President Trump was actually fairly pragmatic. He wasn't as thoughtful as some. Not thoughtful does not make you smart, but he didn't really think about it as much. He just I'm gonna do it, and then I don't like that, I'm gonna do something else. Very much like that. President Biden is really pragmatic. He can't, in fact, he can never make up his mind, I think. But, which is also pretty common. Thoughtful people are like that. If you're really thinking, you're not sure, you weigh 100 different options. Thoughtful people tend to be intellectuals, but it doesn't make them smart. It doesn't make them correct, but they think things through. And is this bad or good? The answer is yes. Doesn't it depend what side you're on? And by the way, what did his supporters say? He had to do it. What did his opponents? He's a hypocrite. So, you will have to do something about the philosophy. Make sure you get pragmatism. That's a biggie. Put a star by that one. That's the most important one. But a lot of Jefferson's philosophy will kind of roll into different elements of American history to this day. Jefferson is an interesting guy. So, even before he became president, so he was elected and was finally decided in November and December of 1800. But he would not take office till March. And in that time, Adams had a plan. It's going to be called Midnight Justices. The Federalists created a bunch of new courts. Every federal court needs judges, appellate judges. And so Adams could appoint the Federalist judges, confirmed by the Federalist Senate. And how long is a judge on the bench? It's a lifetime term. And so that means Adams knows, okay, these Republicans might destroy the world, but we'll make sure there are Federalist judges, at least as some kind of backstop. Or as Republicans saw, this is a naked power play. And which, yes, it was. So they create all these judges, and so they're on the bench when Jefferson became president. Most importantly, Adams chose the new Chief Justice. Jay retired and replaced by John Marshall. And he chose John Marshall not only because he was a strong Federalist from Virginia, but he was a young man, relatively young man. Late 30s, that's young. How long is he going to be on the bench? For 35 more years. He will still be Chief Justice long after the Federalist Party is dead. There's no more Federalist Party, and there's still a Federalist Chief Justice. Can you imagine how mad Jefferson was? And it shows the importance of picking judges. Yes.
Why did they have?
They thought it'd be lifetime, so they would not be worried about some kind of political backlash from their decisions. So the thought was, if they were appointed, like it was a term, or they had to run for a judgeship, their decisions would be could be made to a political issue before they're out of office. So the thought was, if they would get a lifetime appointment, they would be impartial. And so, for example, in Montana, the judges are elected. And this is what the Republicans are going to want because of Marshall. This is a big move. I mean, you think about it for a second. You know, President Trump picked 3 judges, and they're all pretty young. That means they're going to be in office long after Trump is dead. This is a big deal. That's 1/3 of the Supreme Court. And so that gives you an idea of how important that is, especially because of this decision. 3 years afterwards, first off, every Supreme Court is going to be called after the Chief Justice. This is the Roberts Court. Now, it's going to be called the Marshall Court. And this is what we call a nationalist court. Now, in this context, nationalism means something about pro-country, but this means this is what we have to get down, national government. National government. We'll come to the concept of nationalism down the road. That doesn't quite exist yet. Not quite yet. pro-national government over state government. And remember federalism, national, state government. 1803, court case Marbury versus Madison. William Marbury here was supposed to be one of those new midnight judges, but he wasn't. His seat wasn't. He wasn't seated until Jefferson became president. The new Secretary of State, James Madison, back then was supposed to seat him, and Madison said, "Nope, I won't do it." And then the Republicans in Congress, when they took power, passed a new law getting rid of that seat. Marbury sued Madison. And it went to the Supreme Court and the Marshall Court. That's Marshall. What did it rule? Marshall gave the Supreme Court the power of judicial review to check the constitutionality of laws. To check the constitutionality of laws. Now remember, it needs a court case. And a lot of people didn't buy this. For the rest of the century, this was still argued. It wasn't like everybody said, oh, now the Supreme Court will check the laws if there's a court case. And only federal laws, only federal at first. But they gave themselves this power. Jefferson and the Republicans were furious. In fact, Republicans started talking about, we need to impeach these judges. Maybe we need term limits. Maybe we got to get rid of the courts totally. He got radicalized pretty fast. This is the most important court case in American history. So put a star by this. You will need to know Marbury versus Madison. And when do you have to pay for the AP exam? Do you remember the day? November 1st. If anybody takes the AP exam, which I highly recommend, there's always a question with Marbury versus Madison somewhere. Some reference to it. It's that important of a case. It's actually really shocking what the Supreme Court did. You could say it's a good thing or bad thing, but wow, they just said, we're going to give ourselves almost ultimate power. What are you going to do about it? And actually, Andrew Jackson would fight against it pretty hard. Remember, don't write this down. Remember the Treaty of Grenville that gave the United States all this land here? You remember that treaty after the Battle of Fallen Timbers? Well, Jefferson as president, let's get to what he wanted. He was thinking land policy now to open up this land to small farmers. They'll settle this land and push out the people who live here. He's got to get this. Yes, we're coming to this. And the new state of Ohio would be created. The law that we created would be one of the more important laws in American history because it would basically codify the land ordinance of 1785, the Enabling Act, which said there can be in Ohio, and also set aside the money from the sale of public land, from some of it, to education. And that has existed to this day. Public education, this school, the whole system, is reliant upon land tax to this day. We call property tax today. Which is there's problems with that. You know, we live in Montana, so we don't quite see it. But if you live, at least in Helena, but in wealthier areas have more property tax value than poor areas. So that's an issue. But open it up. By the way, there was a problem with this. The law was never clear if Ohio was a state. And actually the law was poorly written and it never allowed Ohio to be a state. So Ohio, another star was put on the flag. They got 2 senators, members of the House. More presidents have come from Ohio than any other state. And yet the law never allowed it to be a state. Ohio was not officially a state until the 1990s. And let me show you one more thing. If you're getting ready to leave, anybody know what that guy is? Johnny Appleseed. He was a real guy. He planted apple trees because he wanted to help small farmers have something there. A real person. It wasn't a myth like Pecos Bill. Paul Bunyan's real. There was a 40-foot tall guy. And he drug attacks and created the Grand Canyon. We know that's true. Don't forget tomorrow. Except you're skipping. Whatever you want me to pull. See you tomorrow.
I've got next one. I'll be here first period.
First grade, that's gonna be awesome.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, get it done.
Can I do the long essay? Do the surgery?
Oh, no, it's okay. I get it about 7.
After school.
I gotta get one.
7:45. So we leave it at. So I'm here at 7:45.
I'll try to get it earlier.
Okay. I'll get down here at surgery. We'll do.
Yeah, I'll get her as soon as, I'll get her as soon as I can. Sound good? Yeah, there's things that, certain things I have to do more probably. Get in there and be quiet.
Okay.
This is just, I gotta lay down the law with you people. Take care. I'm throwing up my hand.
Okay.
I give up. Hey, we have an essay. Oh, I was all ready to do it today. I don't think you have that skill set. Sit down and be quiet. Go, go, go. By the way, my Marie Antoinette, the head, this is the best I can get the head. Did I show you this yesterday?
No.
I didn't show you this. What happened to Marie Antoinette?
She was beheaded.
Yeah, so of course. The head used to shoot off like 3 or 4 feet, so I would shoot at the students. But I think that finally broke the head. Now it sits back. So now she looks like she is possessed by the devil. Okay. And on that happy note,